Hello and welcome back to Afterglow episode 56. In this episode we're gonna go way back. Back to the Atari 2600 for Space Invaders. Now why I'm doing this podcast in a way is to preserve one person's memories of all these games that they have whenever they had been growing up playing them. I don't remember if Space Invaders was the first 2600 game I played, but I know it was definitely one of the early ones. And this game was a huge hit. It was one of the earliest arcade hits out there. I believe it was even before Pac-Man, if I remember right. And it was the first major big arcade conversion to the 2600 that I remember that really blew up. I even remember, reading in books how Space Invaders, the arcade version, was so popular that the machines would jam up because they had so many quarters in them, which is just an insane thought today. Imagine going and getting a Coke and the machine won't take your money because it's so full of money. That's just something that is unheard of these days that actually happened back then, so it's a wild thought. Now, there's not a lot of music for this game, and by a lot of music, I mean there is no music for this game. So for our music breaks, I'm going to be instead playing some commercials, and during my commentary for the game, I will have a long play going on in the background that has all the sound effects and everything. But just because there's no music doesn't mean that the game doesn't draw you in. But I'll be going into all of that after I guess in this episode it'll be called the commercial break.
Uncle Frank, Space Invaders!
Where?
Right here, Uncle Frank.
Space Invaders is a video game cartridge you have to buy separately to play on the Atari video computer system. Your parents hook it up to the TV.
Those are supposed to be the Space Invaders you get with your missiles.
Wow!
That's it, Uncle Frank. You saved our planet.
Yeah, this time.
This is the Atari video computer system. Space Invaders and other video game cartridges are each sold separately.
Okay, welcome back to the show. So if you've listened to the Atari 2600 special that I had with Scott Schreiber from Retro Gaming Roundup, you'll know that my first Atari experience was actually at my uncle's place. He had an attic, and up there was set up a television and an Atari with quite a few carts. And the first time I played this game was up there. Well, he ended up sending me home with an Atari, because he had gotten an NES at the time, and that was the new hotness, of course. But the Atari was my first gaming system. So I got it home, and a few carts stood out right away, including, of course, Space Invaders. So at the time, I remember we had two TVs in the house. We had the main TV, which was a color one, and then my parents had a black and white one in the living room. And going way back, to hook up the Atari to this old TV, the black and white one, you had these pitchforks that would come off. They're tiny little pitchforks that you put underneath a screw on the television. You would tighten these pitchforks in a couple of screws, and that's how the television got the signal from the game console. So, everyone that claims, RCA is antiquated and RF modulation is just a step away from the Stone Age, I remember pitchfork connectors, if that tells you anything. But going back to the game, this game was an absolute blast. And it did stand out in the Atari collection, just because you boot it up and there are so many enemies on the screen. And I think they kind of cheated to get them on there, because they all follow the same pattern. And I believe that in the rows that they're in, it's similar enemies all the way across. They can copy the spread. But it's a really impressive effect. So you have your, I always called it a ship, but technically you're planet-bound. I guess you could call it a tank turret, I don't know. But you would swing it left and right across the field, and you would fire to take out these alien forces that are slowly coming down towards the screen. And the more you take out, the faster they get, until you've only got 3 or 4 that are moving fairly quick. And you get down to 1, that thing is zooming down the screen at you. They travel left to right, then they'll drop down a bit, then they'll go right to left, and that pattern will continue. And they just move so quick whenever you get towards the end of it. And every once in a while there'll be a little UFO that flies across the top of the screen above where the Space Invaders are coming down. You can nail that to get some extra bonus points. And there is a little bit of a tactical effect to this as well. You do have 4 bunkers there on the screen. At least the arcade version has your 4 bunkers, and whenever the aliens are shooting at you, you can hide under these bunkers, and the bunker will take the hit. But the bunker will also get damaged a little bit. And of course, you can damage the bunker from your side as well. So you can actually hide underneath the bunker if you want and make a very, very thin line going through it to attack the aliens coming up. But keep in mind, an alien can get a lucky shot off through that tiny hole and catch you off guard and hit you. But the Atari one was kind of unique in a way in that it added a bunch of game modes that weren't really available in the original arcade version. You had what they called moving shields, which is where the bunkers would move instead of just staying in their position. You have a moment where the aliens are actually invisible. I don't know how you would beat the game with the invisible aliens whenever you got, let's say 24 of these things on the screen at the time. You don't know where you're, trying to aim. I don't see how anyone could beat more than a couple levels, but if you go on YouTube, people they're much better at this game than I am. But the game was an absolute blast, and it was really one of the games that got me into not only the Atari 2600, but in gaming as a whole. It is just such an incredible game. It's fun to this day. But I didn't get another copy of Space Invaders for a really, really long time. I would mostly just emulate it. I remember emulating it on MAME for a while. And of course, I'd go back and play the 2600 version, look at the differences between the two. The arcade version was definitely cleaner and crisper than the Atari, but for what the Atari 2600 was, it was a really faithful reproduction of the arcade game. But I eventually got the arcade 1-up machine of Space Invaders, because again, the game is so iconic. I mean, not only the 2600 version, but just its history in gaming as a whole that I went over in the intro. And again, an absolute blast to play. The game's actually gotten a few remakes on a few different consoles, and then there's a game on Steam now that has different game modes and incredibly enhanced graphics. It's the same game, I think it's called Space Invaders Extreme. It's fun to play. But that being said, it is definitely different from the original, so definitely, if you want to go back to the roots of gaming, check out Space Invaders. It is the perfect starting point to check out the very, very origins of when gaming got real popular and exploded. But that's gonna pretty well be it for my memories. Pretty well short and sweet for the most part. It was my entry game into gaming in many ways. I hope you enjoyed listening. We're gonna listen to one more commercial before we go through the outro.
Out here we entertain ourselves at home, so we got an Atari video game. There's so many different games to play. We especially like Space Invaders, zapping those little devils from outer space. It's fun, but personally I think the whole idea of creatures from outer space is a little far-fetched.
No other company offers you as many different video game cartridges as Atari.
Welcome back. Like I said in the intro, kind of a short and sweet one. We did have a longer one for the last episode with WCW Nitro, and I just wanted to get something kind of short out, but I also wanted to revisit the origins of my memories of gaming, along with kind of the origins of a lot of gaming as a whole. But if you enjoy what you'd listened to, you should totally check out the Discord. We're slowly getting more people in there, a little bit more discussion. I'd love for anyone that enjoys listening who might want to chat about some games, go ahead, drop in, say hi. Maybe you'll like it when they hang out. If you want to support this little show I got, there is a Patreon. You can also find that link in the notes page. It's only $1 a month, and for that you can get a shout out at the end of every episode. Friends of the show include Retro Gaming Roundup, who recently peaked past 200 episodes. I think they're on 202 now. They are an incredibly long-running podcast. Keep in mind, that is 200 episodes where they only release once a month. So they've been at it for a long time. All kinds of news and reviews and interviews, top 10s, gaming facts and trivia. Great show to listen to. There is also Secret Levels. They go over a game usually every week or two, go over fun facts, history, reviewing it. Then they might get a little angry and get into rage mode over it. They might even have a visitor that shows up from time to time who's a little supernatural in a way. Speaking of Secret Levels and Supernatural, they've got an April Fool's episode out that is really, really entertaining to listen to that I might have a small cameo on if you want to check that out. There is also the Lost and Gone podcast with Grimm. He covers Lost and old media. Very entertaining to listen to. He's got a couple episodes out that are in long form. He's got a shorter one out with me with more on the way. Going back to my show, our logo and artwork is done by TobyVonDoom from the Secret Levels podcast, and the intro and outro music has been done by Grimm from the Lost and Gone podcast. So definitely gotta give them their shout-outs every episode. They've done awesome work helping with this podcast, and I can't thank them enough. So that's it for this episode. Like I said, very short, very sweet, but I hope you enjoyed listening. I'll see you on the next episode of Afterglow.